Just about a week ago, we got back from one of the most memorable Virgin Voyages trips we've ever been on. But also, it was one of the coldest temperature voyages we've been on as well. And because it was Brilliant Lady's last time leaving LA for the season, she's heading to colder climates for a long time. We managed to pick up some really practical tips for making the most of Virgin Voyages during colder temperatures. So today, I'm going to talk you through the first half of our journey from Los Angeles to Vancouver on board Brilliant Lady. I'm going to tell you all the fun stuff that we got up to, as well as some regrets that I want to let you know about as well, so you don't make the same mistakes we did. If this is your first time with us, my name is David from VV Insider, which is a website all about Virgin Voyages, including all the information, the guides, the news that you're going to need if you're sailing on board the Virgin Voyages vessels. We literally help millions of sailors every single year plan their perfect Virgin voyage. But despite the fact that we have sailed lots of times with Virgin Voyages in the past, every voyage is unique, and even we make mistakes sometimes. So I'm going to be really honest as I walk through this trip and let you know the things that we didn't get quite right, so you don't make the same mistakes. So we started planning this trip a long time ago. We originally planned to be on the Panama crossing, which started from Miami and ended up in LA. But that was a 16-night voyage, and because we're quite busy, we prefer a shorter voyage when we can. So we had a quick look at all the different itineraries that Brilliant Lady was doing on the west coast of America and saw that this one is perfect for us. This is a repositioning voyage from Los Angeles all the way up to Vancouver. And because it's a repositioning voyage, the price was great. You can often find really good per night prices on these repositioning voyages. All in all, for me and my husband in a sea terrace category cabin, this came to less than $3,000 for the entire trip, including the shore things and port excursions that I'm going to walk you through as well. So really, it wasn't that bad at all in terms of pricing. So we started our journey on the 28th of April, giving us a few days in LA before we set off on the ship. As we live in the north of England, we have to connect somewhere, and we decided to connect in Heathrow. We fly with British Airways a lot, and we know Terminal 5 quite well. We flew in economy class from Heathrow to Los Angeles, which is around about a 10.5-hour flight. Because the flight is through the daytime, I didn't get a wink of sleep, and I'm terrible at sleeping on the plane anyway, so it did feel like a very long flight, I will admit. But it was all worth it because we knew exactly what we wanted to do in LA. One of our very first vacations ever, which was 13 years ago now, was to California. We flew to LA and drove up to Yosemite and then went to San Francisco. So actually returning to California was very special for us, but we knew exactly what we wanted to do in LA because we wanted to relive some of those experiences we had when we were younger. So when we landed in LA, we hired a car and drove all the way to Anaheim. And if you know anything about Los Angeles, that is the home of Disneyland. Now, of course, there are many, many things to do in the Los Angeles area, but we knew we wanted to do those tourist traps that we loved so much from when we were younger, so it was a no-brainer for us to return to Disneyland. We went to Disney California Adventure, which is the sister park to Disneyland, on the first day, and we had an incredible time. We did so many steps that my feet were already aching after the first day, but then on the second day, we headed over to Disneyland Park, and in Disneyland there was a special Star Wars themed event, which meant the park was booked out by Star Wars fans. And because they were more interested in meeting characters and doing things that were Star Wars specific, it meant we could get on the rides pretty easily and the wait times were quite low. So it was a little bit of a hack, although the ticket price was quite expensive. So after we had a great couple of days in Disneyland, we then drove to our next tourist trap, which was Universal Studios Hollywood. And again, we had a fantastic time there. There was an event on called the Fan Fest Night, which again, because it was a special night meant for people of fans of particular TV programs and movies, it meant that the rides were a walk on and we didn't have to queue so much at all. So again, if you're looking at these amusement parks or theme parks, have a look to see if there's any of these special events on. And it means that the locals are more interested in the special event than the rides and attractions. So you can actually have a much easier time of things if you decide to do it that way. Now, of course, Brilliant Lady does use Los Angeles as a home port for quite a lot of the year now, and there are many other things to do in LA. We simply decided to do these two tourist trap attractions because we've been to LA a few times, but there is so much to do in the Los Angeles area. In the past, we've done things like visiting other movie studios. We've also been to Griffith Park and Observatory, the Los Angeles Zoo, we've been to Santa Monica Pier. So make sure you do have a look. If you are sailing from Los Angeles, there are many, many things that you can get up to. So I recommend, if you're traveling a fair distance, to at least have a couple of days, if not more, to explore the area before you head on board. So come embarkation day, we needed to drive from our hotel at Universal Studios Hollywood all the way down to the port of Los Angeles. This actually was only about an hour drive, but there was lots of traffic on the way. So let that be a lesson. Sometimes LA traffic can get the better of you, so do plan ahead. We did set off about an hour earlier than we really needed to. So it ended up, after we returned our rental car and got an Uber back to the port, that we were just right on time for our embarkation. When we arrived at the port in the Uber, we left our luggage with the luggage porters. Because this was an American port, tipping the luggage porter is always expected. So try and factor in around $2 to $3 per bag when you're leaving your luggage with them. After that was done, we headed into the terminal and grabbed our wristbands to then head on board the ship. We were not waiting around for too long and were led onto the ship pretty much 15 to 20 minutes after we arrived. Getting on board the ship the first time is always one of the most exciting parts. We've been on over 20 voyages now, and it's still very exciting when you get on board. And there's always that lovely hustle and bustle on board the ship while everyone's getting their bearings and discovering the ship for the first time. Because this is Brilliant Lady's first season on the West Coast, there were many first-time sailors on board this voyage. And we got chatting to a few of these first-time Virgin Voyages sailors, and they were telling us of the difference that they found between what they're used to in LA, and we found most of them are used to Carnival ships, to the new Virgin Voyages experience. And it was really interesting to hear what they thought of Virgin sailing for the first time. One of the first things we do when we get on board the ship is to head straight to our cabin. And with Virgin Voyages, this is super easy because every cabin is open immediately as you step on board the ship. This is different from a lot of other cruise lines where you might need to wait until, say, 4 or 5 p.m. before you can go to your cabin. On Virgin Voyages, everything is ready for you. So you can just take all your bags up there, your backpack, drop everything off, and you're ready to get on with the rest of the day. So after we dropped our bags, we headed to the galley for a spot of lunch. We hadn't had any chance to get anything in the morning, so it was a perfect time to have a look to see what lunch specials there were at the galley. Then there was a nice opportunity to catch up with some friends that we knew from a previous voyage, and then it was time for sail away. Sail away is always super fun on Virgin Voyages, and it's always a really great opportunity to get to know who is going to be leading the voyage in terms of the happenings cast. This of course is always weather dependent, but luckily as we were leaving LA, we did have nice weather, so the sail away party was hosted outside, and it meant that everyone was in that very celebratory mood. We stood on deck 16 to watch the toast from Abby the hostess and Cara Couture the diva. Then we grabbed some of those free bubbles that are on offer at every single Virgin Voyages sail away before we headed down to deck 15 around the pool to meet some of the other happenings cast members. And I just think the vibe on board was absolutely immaculate. This was a fantastic sail away. And I think in general, the vibe on board and the energy that everyone was bringing was absolutely sublime. I just feel like every sailor was so lovely and there to have a really good time. And it makes all the difference when the people that you meet on board the ship are just fantastic. We met some absolutely fantastic people on board this voyage that leads just such interesting lives. I don't know if it's something to do with the brand, but it seems to attract really interesting people with really interesting stories to tell, and meeting people on board is one of my favorite parts of every single voyage. So if you're watching this now and we said hello on board the voyage, I just want to thank you so much and apologize for being so much of a chatterbox. I will talk all day and you know it. With this being the first night, we were pacing ourselves, so we just grabbed some dinner at the galley. I always tend to enjoy the evening special menu at the galley. If you go to Diner and Dash, they will often have different dinner items. So sometimes it'll be inspired by Chinese food or Indian food. Sometimes it's just mashed potato and prime rib. On the last night, it's beef Wellington. But sometimes it is a really good option. Don't look at it as just a fallback option. Sometimes it can be very much the meal of the evening. You don't always need a sit-down dinner. A more casual vibe sometimes is exactly what you're looking for. And that's what I needed on the first night, because I decided to have a little nap before PJ Party got started. And I absolutely love PJ Party. So after my nap, I got ready to party. I have this incredible cat-themed pajama set, which I am not releasing on YouTube. You're going to have to see it in real life. Keep sailing, you might see me at some point. But just know PJ Party was fantastic. And this was the first indication that this sailing was going to be a little bit more of a cold weather vibe because the PJ party was inside in the manor rather than being outside on deck 16 on the athletic club. And personally for me, I do like a manor PJ party. It just feels a lot more intimate and a lot more fun. And certainly when the night draws on, the nightclub style vibe is a lot better in the manor than it is outside, because it always just feels a little bit sparse outside, especially when people start leaving to go to bed. Now, I tend to be a little bit of a night owl and do stay out quite late, but we did have an excursion the next day, so I was trying to be a little bit more sensible. As we were heading to Catalina Island, this is just a very short jump from Los Angeles port, across the ocean a little into the Channel Islands. And I didn't really know what to expect from Catalina Island, but it was a lovely surprise. We started the day by meeting with our Shore Things group, which is our port excursion. You get given a laminated card with a number on it, and then when that number's called, you then follow the Shore Things representatives to the tender. So with some ports, you might find that the ship is not able to dock, which means that they need to anchor out from the land, and then you need to get what's known as a tender boat, or effectively one of the lifeboats, over to the land instead. Ports that require a tender aren't usually that prevalent in itineraries. Virgin Voyages, when they're setting itineraries up, they prefer ports where they can dock, and it means that it's a much more comfortable guest experience. Sometimes those tender boats can get quite rocky, and in this instance, the tender boat was a little bit rocky, and especially if you've enjoyed PJ Party the night before, sometimes you just have to keep your eye on the horizon and get some fresh air, and that was certainly my experience. But after we got off the tender boat, it was a very short walk to the tram, and the tram journey was going to take us on a 50-minute journey around Avalon, which is the largest settlement on Catalina Island. We then went for a very lovely, albeit quite short tour around Avalon, where we saw some old buildings, including one of the original and largest houses on the island, which belonged to the owner of the Wrigley's chewing gum fortune. We then went along the coast and up to a viewing point where we got a lovely panoramic view of the vista across Avalon, and we could see the ship in the distance as well. It was a really nice introduction to this place we'd never been before. After the tour came to an end, we had a lovely little walk in Avalon and saw some of the gift shops, the souvenir shops, and then we stopped for some food at the pier. There was a hut that sold fish and chips. Of course, they're never going to be as good as real fish and chips that you'll get here in Britain, but never mind. We then had a lovely little walk up to Catalina Casino, which isn't a casino at all, but is a theatre. There's a little bit of history there, but it costs like $28 to get in, and we decided against it. But then the weather turned, so we headed back to the ship. But that is a lesson learned, because it did turn a little bit cold in the end, and I definitely didn't have enough layers or anything waterproof. And it did start to rain a little bit as we were in the line to get back on the tender. So maybe you can learn from my mistakes and make sure that you are prepared before you head out on land. Not least because sometimes the queues to get back on the tender boat can be a bit lengthy, so just be prepared for that as well. When we got back on the ship, it was time to relax a little bit before dinner. And dinner this evening was very special indeed. We went to the test kitchen. The test kitchen is the experimental restaurant on board with a menu inspired and designed by a Michelin star chef. We often hear from people that have been to the test kitchen a number of times, those that have maybe sailed a number of times in the past, that it does get a bit samey. And although we do agree to an extent, we had a fantastic server this time. She was called L'Oréal, she was from France, and she had the most incredible knowledge of everything that we were eating. And she was able to tell us things about the dishes that we had never heard from any other server before. She did an incredible job and turned what could have been a fairly mundane evening meal into something that we remembered for the rest of the trip. So thank you very much, L'Oréal. After dinner, it was time for everyone to get ready for Electric, which is one of the themed club nights on board Brilliant Lady. The last time we went to Electric was way back last year during the launch of Brilliant Lady. So I must admit this felt quite fresh to me because so much has happened since last year. But needless to say, we had a really great time at this party. And we heard from many other guests that this was one of their favourite club nights on board Brilliant Lady. They really do a great job of transforming the manor into this electric neon themed party. There are special dance numbers and really fun activations from the Happenings cast. Then Abby the hostess comes out looking incredible in her neon costume to sing an incredible song that is matched up to the theme of the evening. This is a really special moment because it does stop the party in its tracks. but everyone stops to hear Abby sing, and quite rightly so. It's really easy to see why electric is becoming a real fan favourite among sailors when it comes to the different theme nights that are offered across the Virgin Voyages fleet of ships. Now, because the electric party is so high energy and so fun, it does tend to attract those that like to stay out a little bit later than they should, including myself, which meant that the next day, thankfully, was a sea day, and that gave us plenty time to turn ourselves around. So after a much deserved lie-in, we managed to emerge in time for the galley opening up for lunch. And like I say, I'm a big fan of the galley specials. I ended up having some lovely chicken with noodles and pak choy. It was a really nice lunch. There are tons of options available for lunch across the galley, and we found the quality of the food and the service in particular was exemplary on this voyage. And in general, it's always pretty good, but it was really exemplary on this voyage. I can't put my finger on exactly why, but everything was hot and fresh, and all of the staff that we came into contact with were just absolutely lovely. So after our lazy lunch, we then headed downstairs to do a spot of shopping in the Virgin Voyages brand store. We didn't buy a lot, but I do always like to look to see what new stuff there is. And I did notice they've got a whole new range of glassware, which are branded with the octopus tentacles on. They look amazing, but I get in trouble for buying far too much kitchenware, so I left them on the shelf this time. Then before dinner, there was just time to catch cabaret with the hostess, and I'm very glad because I very rarely miss an opportunity to hear Abby sing. Not only is she an incredible singer, but she's also absolutely hilarious. You'll know if you've been along to any of Abby's sets that she injects this incredible level of comedy into her shows, and this was no exception. You would not believe this was just a mundane Wednesday afternoon. And trust me, I've seen Abby's show and heard Abby's shtick a lot, but it still makes me laugh. I think she's an incredible performer. So if you're ever on board where Abby is the hostess, do not miss a cabaret or any of what she does. She's just an incredible performer. Then it was time for dinner, and this was our first time back at Rojo, which is the Spanish-themed restaurant on board Brilliant Lady. We absolutely loved Rojo from back last year when we first went on Brilliant Lady during her launch season, and I was so excited to get back. So excited that I totally forgot to record any of the food until we'd already eaten it all. So here's the only footage that I've got. Just take that as proof how good Rojo really is. We love the food there. But despite how good the food is, you need to leave room for dessert. The Basque cheesecake on the dessert menu is possibly my favorite thing to eat across all 4 ships, across any restaurant, across any eatery. So do always save room for dessert when you head to Rojo. Then after dinner, it was our first time to see Red Hot. So when we first stepped on board Brilliant Lady last year, Red Hot wasn't ready to go. It was still in rehearsals. We managed to see Out of Time last year, which is the other show that's available in the Red Room on Brilliant Lady, but this is our first time seeing Red Hot. And the performances, dancing and vocals that we saw in Red Hot were absolutely incredible. And it's really easy to see why this show in particular makes the Virgin Voyages brand team very, very happy indeed. The show gives a potted history of the Virgin brand, and there's nods to Atlantic, to Record, and particularly there is a nod to Virgin Voyages, which is the moment where the audience really, really respond. I will say, bizarrely, the show then ended with the Spice Girls medley. It felt to me like it would have been nicer if they ended on the Virgin Voyages note, because that's where everyone was applauding and really responding. And then it went into Spice Girls. I found that a little bit jarring. But perhaps that's just me. I am a fan of Spice Girls, but maybe I'm more of a fan of Virgin Voyages. I don't know. But after Red Hot, it was time for an early night because it was a big day. We were heading to San Francisco, and this in particular was one of our absolute favorite days. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have been to San Francisco before, so many of the tourist attractions we'd already done, and we are incredible nerds at heart. This entire company, VV Insider, only got its start because we are techie people and we like building things. And I built a website about Virgin Voyages, and that turned into vvinsider.com. But we've always been big fans of technology, and we'd originally planned an excursion through Virgin Voyages that was going to take us on a tour of different sites in Silicon Valley, including the headquarters of Google and Apple. But unfortunately, not enough people had booked this excursion, so it ended up getting cancelled. Well, we didn't want to waste the opportunity, so instead of the excursion, we hired a car. Now, I just want to set the context that I'm from the UK and I drive an electric car, that effectively drives itself. Well, you can imagine my surprise and horror when we were given this massive Jeep from the rental car company. It only cost £45 for the day. I was not expecting this huge behemoth vehicle. What's more, it didn't even have as much as lane assist, and we were having to drive a whole hour down to the Apple headquarters. Needless to say, it was a little bit hair-raising, but we managed to get there in the end. The Apple headquarters were really cool. There was a visitor center that you could go to, and there were souvenirs you could buy. We had a little bit of lunch in the cafe there as well, before exploring the Apple campus on this massive aluminium model that you could walk around with an iPad to see an augmented reality version of the campus. Now, of course, this is not a normal San Francisco tourist trap, but it was exactly what we wanted to do with our morning. Also, the weather was absolutely lovely in San Francisco, so it was great conditions for driving, and it was just a really nice place to walk around. So we decided to get back in the car and ended up driving back to the center of San Francisco and then crossing the Golden Gate Bridge, which in itself is such a fantastic experience. When you're driving, you of course can only look at so much, but even then it was just an incredible experience to know that you're driving on such an iconic piece of history. After we crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, we then went up to this viewpoint called Hawks Hill. Now, it's well worth the drive. It's a little bit further than some of the other Golden Gate viewpoints, but the view we got from here was spectacular, and we could actually see Brilliant Lady peeking through the Golden Gate Bridge. We tried to zoom in to get as much of a picture as we could of it, but you can just see the scale of this panoramic view is absolutely huge. But we got sweeping views of the bridge and the marina. Absolutely incredible. I would really recommend taking the trip to Hawk Hill if you can. Well, after that lovely view, I thought I'd had enough of driving, so we ended up handing the hire car back in. And that's where our journey today, at least, is going to end, because I want to save some tales for next week, including a taxi that we got in, which terrifyingly had no driver whatsoever. I'm going to tell you about the incredible experience of sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge as we left, and the terrible calamity I made of trying to film that moment. And one of you lovely YouTube viewers came to my rescue with your own video, so you'll see that next week as well as a far more exciting whale watching experience than I ever thought possible, where there were moments I was sure we were all going to be killed, as well as our incredible experience in Vancouver, where we were lucky enough to try our very first seaplane flight. We had the most incredible time on this journey, and I can't wait to fill you in with more details next week. In the meantime, if you're looking to catch up on all the latest Virgin Voyages news, we put out a video last week talking about the new Valentine's Day sailings next year, as well as all the new stuff that's coming to Brilliant Lady for her Alaska season, which she's on right now. I've linked that video at the end and in the description as well. If you want to come back next week to hear about all our escapades as we headed up to Vancouver, then make sure that you stay subscribed. And of course, if you're looking to get on a voyage yourself and you'd like to support the work that we do here, then we'd love to help you plan your next voyage. If you head to vvinsider.com/book, you can find out about all the ways that we can help you plan your next voyage and act as your first mate or travel advisor for when you're planning your next trip. Not only does it help support the content that we produce here, but also it's well worth you having the #1 Virgin Voyages expert at your side when you're booking your next trip. Thank you so much for coming along. I can't wait to tell you more next week. And until then, happy sailing.